Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a centralized platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect and tap into various resources in health, in finance, and careers. More importantly, this show is all about athletes transition out of sports, which is a major issue today. And we interview former college and professional athletes and talk about their transition ultimately to successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. So excited today to have with us Reggie Rusk. How you doing, Reggie?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. So Reggie played football at University of Kentucky, and then he went on to play in the NFL. He played with Tampa, Seattle, and ultimately the Chargers. And when sport was over for Reggie, just kind of getting into the whole entrepreneurship realm, he's an NFL Players Association rep in the Texas area, and then he's also started his own business. It's called Stay Recruited. Really looking forward to hear more about that in a little while. So, Reggie, when you were growing up playing sports, talk about how that shaped you leading up into college.
I think, growing up, sports was everything. We didn't have a lot of, video games and a lot of the things that the kids have today. So getting outside, playing sports was something that was very, very important to me and essential for my development for sure.
And did you dream about being a professional athlete? Did you want to be a NFL player? Did you want to be a Major League Baseball player? What was your kind of your childhood dream?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to play professional football. I remember back then the Dallas Cowboys was my favorite team. I think just solely because they were always on TV. So I took a a great liking to the Cowboys. I knew all of the players, just from watching them on TV, and it really fortified that for me. Just playing sports and being football was that number one sport that I started playing.
Yeah, that's. I think every kid dreams about it to play sports. I mean, for me, I always talk about I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, talent wasn't there, so now I do podcasts and run companies. So let's talk about. I mentioned in the beginning that transitioning out of sports is such a major issue today. Talk about when you were in school at Kentucky. Was there any type of programs, kind of on the education of what would happen, once you're done with sport?
There was no information, high school, college, or even pros. I mean, once you graduated from college and had the opportunity to make it to the pros, there was very limited information, just even about life after sports, much less, you know, the things that you're going to be transitioning into. We had to figure it out on our own. There was no classes that I knew about that would get us prepared for what the world of living without sports was going to be.
Yeah, and I think it's you bring it up. I mean, a lot of people like you and myself were in sports. I ran cross country track a little bit in college, and I got hurt. But yeah, there wasn't the education. Even today, there's some, but there's still a lack of it. And some of the things that we're trying to do is, and I talked a little bit offline a while back about just getting into schools and developing additional curriculum, for these athletes, so that whether it's the current athletes now or the alumni athletes who they still need help when they're done, whether it's finishing from college sports, whether it's finishing from professional sports. So I think there is a real need for that education, and hopefully there's organizations out there. I know you're doing some of that even at the high school level, where we can start making an impact in that space. So let's talk a little bit about networking, connecting. I think it's so critical, and talk about the importance of doing it, especially while you're playing.
Yeah, I think that was one of my biggest regrets of just now that I can reflect and look back at things that I feel like I um, lacked while I was in college. I think the networking aspect was one of those things that, I just had no clue about. And, I think it comes from education. I think it comes from your background, where you're, proximity, right? Some kids, um, they may have grown up in a family household where networking was something that they did, so they understood it. Unfortunately, that's not most of our experiences. And for me, um, I was really upset at myself not, just because I feel like, wow, how many opportunities did I miss because I just had no clue about the power of networking while you're in your sport, and definitely in college. I mean, Kentucky is one of those places that has a rich tradition, especially in basketball. But I think if I would have known more about networking and some of those opportunities, I would have really tried my best to network with the people that I feel like could have pushed my career forward, or even after the transition from playing. And now becoming an NFL player, most of these college guys, they still have no clue about the power of networking while you're an athlete. So many companies, businesses want to work with us, but we have no idea, and we don't understand the power of, building those relationships early.
Yeah, and you probably bring because you bring up a good point too. Even going back to high school, because we talk sometimes, it's just taking advantage. You've got your teammates, you've got their parents, you've got coaches. I mean, people want to help. And I was talking to a couple guys, college athletes now, and they just said they were never really taught that, and they wish they weren't. I mean, they're still in college now, but they realize the importance of that. And you just hit on so many things. I've talked to some agents too that have just said that a lot of these athletes, especially like you mentioned, not doing it while they're playing, and then all of a sudden when they're done, they're kind of like, okay, where's my 6-figure job, and let's go. And because
It's
they
not
haven't
there.
built that, yeah, it's not there. They haven't built the network connection. So I'm sure that's something you're passionate about. I mean, kind of going through it yourself, and now maybe having the opportunity to share that advice with others.
Well, I really believe that this has to be something that the universities really focus on, because if you don't know, you just don't know. And like I said, many of these kids are coming from environments where they're networking. What's networking? So I think the universities have to do a better job of preparing these guys for transition. It's not always about the X's and O's, the wins and losses, because you're getting and bringing these kids in, and you're using them for 4 years, and the only thing that they're being developed is on the football field. They don't know how to network. They don't know about financing. So there's a lot of areas that I feel like the universities are should be responsible for, and they're not. And like you mentioned earlier, there are organizations that try to do their best to prepare athletes at every level, but they're just not enough. It's way too many athletes for a couple organizations that are trying to do this. And I think also, a lot of times our mindsets are not prepared just yet. Athletes have to train, and then it becomes muscle memory. So you have to apply this in the same format. It has to be every day, boom, 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 on a regular schedule, and then they'll start understanding. Oh, this is why I need to do this. That's one thing about athletes' brain. You have to show them why they're doing this and what's the reason for you doing this. And I think when you do that, you're going to have more success.
Yeah, I agree. And so what would people like yourself that were elite athletes and were fortunate to play on professionally? How do you kind of get to the athlete to recognize that? Because I think sometimes it's just you're so focused on your sport, which is understandable. So like any kind of suggestions that you can give maybe now to current college athletes, being the journey that you went through and everything you just mentioned, of how they can focus on it while they are still playing.
Like I mentioned, it's got to be a part of the program. It has to
Okay.
be. You line up and you practice for offense, you practice for defense, you practice for special teams, you watch film. This has to be just as important as those things,
Right.
because you're sending kids out into the world, and they're not equipped with the tools to be successful off the field as they are. You're equipping them for success on the field, but not off the field. So this has to be just as important as offensive meetings.
Right.
You have to bring people in to speak to these guys on a regular basis, talking about entrepreneurship. Most athletes they want their destiny in their own hand, because that's, as an athlete, that's what you do. You're putting your destiny in your hand. You're training. You're doing all of these things. There's no difference. Um, it's just got to be something that's important, that's driven home to them, and it's got to be a part of the programming.
Yeah, I totally agree. Excuse me. So let's talk about alumni connections. So when you were at school, were they bringing back the alumni? And I mean, you were on football, but just really across any sport to kind of mentor and work with the current athletes, and not just coming back for like the homecoming games and stuff like that.
I cannot remember, and that this particular reason is one of the reasons why I started my own organization, because I remember this being the same case in high school. No, former players were coming back, trying to encourage the new players to, go out, make it to college, and be successful. And I don't remember that in college as well. It was just so much about each week, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, that's what, when you're playing big football, that's all it's about. And, going to
Yeah.
class, you got to make sure that you're attending class and doing all those things. But um, we were not prepared. We did not have the tools. We didn't have people coming back and pouring into us. So I can see why many guys don't transition well.
Do they make any efforts now? Do you hear it all from them as far as trying to come back to Kentucky now?
No, I reached out to Kentucky a few years ago. I think now this is my case, right? I'm sure guys that are from that area come back to the schools. I have a group chat with several of my teammates, and they actually have sons that are playing for the University of Kentucky, so they're around the program. I just don't know what extent that they're around the program, but I really don't know if they are really opening the doors for alumni to come back. I've never received an email, and at the time that I was drafted to the NFL from Kentucky, there were not many guys being drafted from Kentucky.
Right.
There were not many guys, earning all SEC honors when I was there. So you would think that they would open the door for alumni to come in, because we're inspiring to the next generation
Right.
of players, especially at a school like Kentucky, where basketball is the main focus and not football. And over the recent years, they've gotten a different coach in, and they're doing better in football, and they're putting a little bit more, players out in the NFL. And there are a few big name guys, like Randall Cobb, that have come from Kentucky. But I think at the end of the day, the more people you can bring back to that organization that have done it, it inspires the next generation of athlete to say, hey, I may be at a Kentucky and I'm playing in the SEC, but there's an opportunity for me.
Yeah, and it's I bring this up on several other podcasts with other guests, and I went back to my school and we talked about I had with me a former he's a Hall of Fame player for the school, played 10 years in the NFL, and we talked to the athletic department. It's kind of like, well, yeah, we really don't do a good job with the mentoring, and he's like, tap me in. I mean, you got a Hall of Fame guy, NFL player, like I want to come back and help. I'm offering my services, and they don't
Right.
take it. I think schools just need to do that. I mean, it's I talked to one an athletic director, and he talked about how at his school, it was a smaller school, but they encourage the different programs, the coaches and all that, to reach out to the alumni. And he talked about like even like cross country, for example, like reaching out to a former cross country runner from that school that ended up giving $30,000 back to the cross country or the track program. So I mean, I think the schools should do it. They just don't take advantage of it. And I know it's got to be a two-way street, but to me, like even talking to you and everybody else I've talked to, like, yeah, I'll come back, I'll help.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think for the most part, most guys would come back. It gives them a sense of belonging again, right? Like you've transitioned out. You may not have that opportunity to be around guys because you're not in the locker room anymore. And you may have a job, and you know these people that you're working with may not have ever played sports. So I think it's a great opportunity for any university to bring former players back and let them pour into the current players. It's a funny thing, like you know, I'm with the NFLPA, and we were having a meeting, and a guy approached me, and he said, "You're Reggie Rusk?" And I was like, "Yes." He was like, you know, he told me his name. He was like, "Yeah, I played at Kentucky." And he was like, "Man, y'all really inspired us." And I was like, "I've never been back." So, but apparently they've had pictures up of us that went to the NFL. And like I said, I was probably like one of the me and a guy a year before me were drafted into the NFL. And until that time, none of those guys were going to the NFL. So he was inspired because he never met me before, but he was inspired because he saw that he was a DB, I was a DB, and I was drafted. So I know the power of seeing someone that looks like you do big things. Now it inspires you to be able to feel like you can do those same things.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great, and I get again, it just goes back. These schools should be taking advantage of it, and trying to bring back their alumni athletes. So here's my two fun questions. First one is, what advice in 10 words or less? What advice would you give to freshman Reggie?
I would definitely give them the advice of network, understand that you're a brand in a business, and the more you network is going to help your brand.
Okay, that's great. And then now fast forward to senior Reggie.
Senior is, I think, preparing for the life as an athlete to be over. Even if you do have an opportunity to play in the NFL, prepare for life to be different. I think that's the best advice to give to someone, especially a lot of guys who, I'm going to make it to the NFL. Even if you do make it to the NFL, like 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years,
Yeah,
that's a short amount of time.
yeah, it's and you'll probably say the same thing. I've talked to a bunch of former NFL players, like, yeah, not for long, right?
Herm Edwards was my DB coach my rookie year, and I still remember him saying that. You know, he said, "Do y'all know what the NFL stands for?" And we were like, "No," and he was like, "Not for long, so don't get comfortable." And
There you go.
it
Good.
stuck with me. I never felt comfortable the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, for all you out there, Herm Edwards was definitely a great coach. So to get that, that's good advice from him. So let's talk now about just the transition out of sports. So you've kind of faced two transitions, so to speak. So talk a little bit about transitioning from college to professional, and then the follow up to that will be, once you're out of playing.
Yeah, I think the transition from college to NFL, one of the biggest transitions is you're not the best player anymore. You're not one, you know, you are competing against guys that are 3, 4, 5, up to 10 years older than you. And they have experience and they understand the game. And here it is, you think it's all about your athletic ability. And when you make it to the NFL, you find out real quick you have to be smart. You have to study. You have to understand schemes every week. And it's not so much solely based off of athletic ability because I saw many very talented athletic guys get cut and never play again. So um, I think that was the biggest transition going from college to NFL, the speed, the knowledge of the game. You really had to study. If you did not study, you would not make a team. You know, there's a ton of great athletes that are competing against you. So I learned that pretty quick. Luckily for me, I was always a guy that was full speed. Even if I made mistakes, it was full speed, and the coaches really started to like me because of that. You know, I was hard nosed, full speed, and was eager to learn. I think that's another thing that's very vital for a guy coming in from college going into the NFL. Be eager to learn, no matter where you got drafted from.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And then now you've played, your football your whole life, sports your whole life, and now as your NFL career ended, talk about that transition out of being an everyday player
From NFL to
to just
civilian
like
life.
yeah to civilian life. Yeah. Everybody say it's civilian life, real life. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
different.
real
Everybody.
life. Yeah. It's a challenge because you think about it. Someone's told you what time to be at this meeting, what time to be at class, so you're giving directions your entire life. You really did not have control of yourself as much as you think you had control of yourself. So when you transition out, now it's like, who am I? What am I going to do? And why am I doing it? But when you were playing, you didn't have those questions. You knew you were a football player. You knew where to be because they told you to be there, and you knew why you were trying to play. I want to make it to the NFL, right? So that's your motivation. So when you get out, what's your new motivation? What's your why? Who are you? And I think many players have to ask themselves, who are they now that football is no longer a part of their lives? There's no locker room. There's no teammates. So who are you? So that transition is very difficult because you have always been in a room with people like you. And now you're in a room full of people possibly that have no idea who you are. They can't assimilate to you and same vice versa. So you're now asked to be like everyone else, and that's difficult because our how we're wired mentally is totally different than how average Joe is wired, right? They're used to working in an environment with other people like that. We're not. So I think the transition is difficult just because we don't have the tools to transition. I feel like if we had the tools to transition, I think we're very intelligent, smart people. You have to be smart to start learning. People think that football is just about going on and being an athlete. It's not. You have to learn every week. You're learning new schemes and different things. Um, so the transition out is difficult just because I feel like we're not giving the proper tools to transition.
Yeah, I agree. So what knowing that the tools aren't out there, any words of advice to these athletes coming out of this, maybe they don't have those tools, but what they can do based on your experience?
I think it starts from college, if possible, right? If you learn how, like what we said earlier, get out, network with people who are not athletes. That way you learn the language, right? You can speak the language of other athletes. That's easy because that's something that you've done your entire life. Can you speak the language of people who are not engaged in sports? That's going to make an easier transition because now you're able to communicate with, if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to communicate with people, right? If you're trying to, be a whatever your career is after, whatever that is, you have to learn how to communicate. So I think as many opportunities as you can take to get out of that comfort zone of being an athlete, that's going to set you up for the transition. And the next thing is, when you're playing, start setting these things up. You won't play forever. You know, realize that you could play 1 year or you could play 20 years, but you don't know. None of us know. So take that time, take those opportunities because you're around some very high profile people, even outside of the locker room, right? Get time and meet with these people, speak with these people, and learn things from them. When I was a rookie, I would hang more with the older guys than I would the younger guys because they've been around, so they knew more. And first tip of it at what is it? Investing was through a veteran, like a guy that's been in the league for 10 years. And, he told me about investing. So I think being aware of those things as a young player, I think those things are going to help you transition a lot better. But if these kids don't know that, they won't ask. It's got to be ingrained. So when kids come into our program, we are talking about networking, networking. I mean, it's drilled in their brain. Even if they don't do it now, the seeds have already been planted. We're watering them all the time, and then they start understanding a lot better.
There's a lot of good nuggets in there, as I always say, and it was a perfect segue too to talk about obviously there's been years leading up to what you're doing today with with your business, but let's talk about Stay Recruit and some of the things you kind of talked about right now. You're imparting this knowledge in some of these younger athletes. Give us an idea of what you're doing and how you're making an impact.
So I've always been one of those guys. I've always been pretty much entrepreneurial mindset. When I was a kid, I was selling stuff at school, and that was just me. It was just in who I was. But when I did go through those transitional periods, I did feel lost. Even though I had my own business and I was trying to stay busy, I still felt lost. But one thing that I always did was went back to my high school. And even when I first started attending college, I would go back and speak at high schools and elementaries. So when I made that transition, I was like, I need to be that guy that I wish I had when I was in school. I'm gonna this is gonna be a priority for me to give back and speak on the things that I felt like I was deficient of. So that's exactly what I did. I just became the person that I wish I knew when I was going through that situation. And I think if everyone followed that mindset, we would all be in a better place, right? Like if you know something, help someone up to that place that you're at or where you're trying to go. And so that's pretty much what Stay Recruited is all about. I made a decision. I saw a bunch of the athletes that were coming into my gym. They were training hard. They were, eager to get better at their position, at their sport, but they had no idea what was to come. I had kids that were they were going through that same adversity. Like, oh, my coach, he's not that doing this. He's not playing me. He's not. So I've been there, right? When I went to Kentucky, my junior year, I was one of the best players on the team. I knew I was. But for whatever reason, the coach felt like someone else was better. And I was very, very upset because I had never been through that before. I'm the guy that every coach loves because I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be. I'm a leader, not a verbal leader. I'm a action leader. So why wouldn't a coach want me in the lineup? And I had to learn really quick, take it out of the coach's hand. How do you do that? You be the best player on the field when you get out there, period. So that's what I started teaching my players. And then as time progressed, I learned that they have the same deficiencies I had. They don't understand networking. They don't understand trying to do their own business. I probably was the first business that they didn't even realize that I was a business. They just knew Coach Reggie, right? So then that's when I started bringing in guest speakers. I started, spending time with them afterwards, after the workouts, talking to them. And it just made a huge difference, man. The kids started going to college. They started doing better. I had some of the strongest athletes on each respective team. And that's when I knew I had something. And so then, as time goes on, you add to what you're currently doing. And that's when I started Stay Recruited in 2018. I was like, I need to start, career advancement, because what happens to my kids that go to college and they don't know what to do after that? So now we started, our career development program, where I wanted my kids to have relationships with local businesses. So if they graduated from high school, or went to college and didn't know what to do next, guess what? They have relationships with people that they can get jobs with. So that's kind of how everything started. And then as time goes, you get a little bit better, more knowledge about, you know, how you want things to go. And that's where we are now.
Now, are you working with just you're in Dallas area, right?
Houston.
Houston area. Okay. Are you working just in that area, or is it something that's spread out around the
No,
country?
we're working. We have companies in Atlanta, Alabama, Louisiana, and in Texas. We actually were planning a maritime event for the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of things that we're doing that we want to come to where the athlete is, right? Meaning, like, let's take a career like aviation. Aviation is pilots are very similar to the mindset of an athlete. You know, they're driven, they're focused. They only see, and that's what you need a pilot to be. And that's exactly how an athlete is. So what happens if we start introducing and exposing these young men to these type of careers early? Now, you don't necessarily need the NFL because you have other things going. I think that's another one of the biggest things for professional athletes. When you need the NFL, that's when things really are kind of dicey. But if you don't necessarily need the NFL, you're out there, you're playing free, you're performing at a high level. Those are the guys that are like Hall of Famers. They have the work ethic, of course, and they have the luck of not being injured for the most part, right? But I think they just love the game. They don't have so much weighing down on them, so they can go out and play freely. Those guys that don't feel like the pressure is too much for them, it may not work out the same way.
Well, there's a lot in there, and it's good that you're spread across the different areas. So, how do people find you?
So you can go to my website. It's stayrecruited.org. And we named it Stay Recruited because you hear recruited, you think, athletes being recruited to go to college, but actually you're being recruited in life all the time. You're recruited for that job, you're recruiting to go into college. So there, Stay Recruited doesn't just solely mean athletic, right? It means being prepared for life. And that's what we try to make sure that we're instilling in the kids that are in our program.
Yeah, I love that, being prepared for life. That's awesome. And then you said basically it's both high school and college athletes for
Yeah,
the most part.
we for the most part, I really target high school athletes more so than college. Of course, I have college guys, so I work with them. But I feel like these these conversations have to be had early. You have to plant the seed as early as possible. If you wait to a guy's in college, he's kind of like, he's been around for a little while. He starts feeling himself. He sees all his friends. His friend has NIL deals. It's so many obstacles in the way once a kid goes off to college, right? I have some kids right now that I'm working with. I work with their parents. They're in college now. They are receiving NIL, and I'm basically trying to help them structure a business so they're not paying taxes, understand how to put money away, because there's no guarantee that they're going to make it to the NFL. But the reason why I can do that is because I knew them in high school.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Yeah. You built a relationship with them already.
you, yeah, and
There's
because
that trust factor.
the trust, and that's the most important thing. Once you, we're exploited. Athletes are probably one of the most exploited groups, right? Because people see you, they see, oh, you play professional football, they already think that you have millions of dollars,
Right.
and so um, everyone has a business for you, everyone has an investment for you, and if you don't have any knowledge of investing, don't trust everybody that comes to you and has a great investment or business plan. But with how I always envision Stay Recruited to be, we're going to have all of those things in house. So if a guy has known these kids since they were in high school and they know me, they better not screw over my guys, right?
Yeah.
It's that trust factor.
Yeah.
So that was my vision 20 years ago. And it's just now starting to really come into fruition.
That's great. So this has been great, Reggie. Appreciate all of the time, the insight. You can find us at alumnidirect.com. Athletes, Entrepreneurs, Alumni Journey is on our YouTube channel as well as across all the different podcast networks. And every show I just talk about just great advice that we're getting from our guests, and just we want to help. I always say help at least one person, but obviously we want to help a lot of people. So I think it's the more people that tune in and listen and watch this podcast just can get so much out of it, because there's definitely a need for help and we want to do it. So Reggie, thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody for the next show.
Sounds good. I appreciate you having me on.